I loved it. I needed a cigarette after that game. Are you kidding me? That was amazing. I love seeing that debut. Obviously, the most points that any Celtic has ever scored in the debut. The 5 threes were great, but the 4 blocks, what he brought defensively to the table, I thought was something a lot of people were concerned about after losing Robert Williams. But his ability, the block he had on R.J. Barrett, the block he had on Mitchell Robinson, his ability to protect the rim and then give them what they need offensively at the other end, the 15-point first quarter, I mean, that was tremendous. And you know what I liked about it the most? You know, outside of Porziņģis, the fact is they didn't shoot the 3 well in that game at all. They shot terribly from 3. They shot 31% from 3. And last year, that team would have been done, and they would have rolled over. And they ended up winning that game, even though the Knicks shot 43% from 3. And that was the thing last year. If they weren't hitting the threes, they were done. You know what they did late when they got down by 6? They dialed up the defense. 1 of 9 down the stretch for the Knicks, and they were able to gut that game out. And Mazz, you and I have talked about this. I think it applies to every sport. If you're going to be a championship team, you have to be able to win in multiple ways. You can't just have one path to victory. And they already showed me in just one game in the season opener that they're a different team from last year with multiple paths to victory. Offensively, it doesn't have to be all threes. You know, we can go to Porziņģis and he can do his thing, and I know he hit the 5 threes, but also we can win defensively down the stretch with Holiday, Porziņģis, and the rest of this team. So that was everything I wanted out of an opener from the Celtics.
So is that, you know, not having Marcus Smart, who would be bums away in that situation late?
It's always a plus, Jim.
But you also think there might be like sort of an organizational mandate to say, look, we're not going to be so 3-focused. We can get points other way.
I think it's interesting because Joe Mazzulla, I think anybody who watched him play as a player at West Virginia, he was gutty and he was gritty and he was a pest and he was about defense. So I don't know if he just bought into the analytics stuff too much last year, but I want the team to have more of his actual persona as a basketball player and less of this, the most important stat in basketball is the 3-point shot. So I do think it was a focus based on both the personnel they brought in the offseason and also Mazzulla maybe changing his coaching approach a little bit. By the way, did you guys notice he banged the timeouts?
Oh,
when he was supposed to bang the
Yeah.
timeouts, it wasn't like waiting for them to work their way out of it. I think it was a little bit more of a focus from the organization to show a little bit more, as Danny Ainge used to use this word all the time with me, resolve. You know, how much resolve and resiliency do we have? That team last year didn't have enough. I do think some of the guys on the team were an issue with the roster last year with that, responding to negativity or adversity.
So stop there. Sure. Who are you talking about?
Grant Williams and Marcus Smart. Yeah. I think that those are guys who didn't always respond. They responded, and they responded with a lot of passion. But that doesn't mean they always responded well or appropriately to negativity or adversity. I saw a team that had a little bit more equanimity, a little bit more composure when they were down. I mean, they could have they dominated basically that entire game, and then the Knicks are bombing away from 3. Amanda quickly is lighting it up, and all of a sudden you look up, and you're down 6 with 3:13 to go. And instead of anybody trying to play hero ball or guys barking at each other, they just sort of buckled down, played great defense, gutted out the points that they needed. Porziņģis hits the dagger 3, like I said, 1 of 9 down the stretch. And that one for the Knicks, it was the Isaiah Hartenstein putback. It was kind of like a fluky, like it had a weird bounce, and it bounced right to him, and he put it back in. That was the only field goal the Knicks had across the final 3:13. That's a different Celtics team to me. That's a team that can not only win on offense, but can win with defense as well.
Is there any reason to be concerned about how Jaylen Brown fits with this group?
Yeah, because did you see on the Porziņģis 3, did you see Jaylen Brown sitting there like
He's
this?
in the corner, yeah.
He was waiting for Porziņģis to pass him the ball. And in past situations, past seasons, on past teams, that ball would have been swung to him, and it wasn't. I mean, he was like this, like, I'm getting this. And Porziņģis just took the shot and buried it. So I do think there could be an adjustment period there. And the one thing I still see from Jaylen and Jason, both of them, but let's be honest, it's Jason's show, right? I acknowledge that. They both suck without the ball. Neither one of them moves without the ball. They don't cut hard enough. They don't make themselves available. They're not hard enough to defend without the ball. And somebody is going to have to become more proficient creating offense or creating opportunities or creating space without the ball out of that group of Porziņģis, Tatum, and Brown. And my guess is it's probably going to be Brown who's going to be tasked with that. He's going to have to become better at that. You can't just stand 25 feet from the hoop like this, like you're passing me the ball, right?
How about some of the intangible stuff? I mean, on the floor, the turnovers, the handle, things of this nature.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That Tatum turnover at the end, if Jaylen Brown had that, they'd be rioting in the street on Causeway Street right now. They'd be rioting in the street holding printed out copies of his contract from Spotrac. So, I mean, what happened on that? I haven't heard it. Has anybody called in on that?
Oh, yeah, we pointed it out.
Did you point it out?
I
But
did.
if you have callers point, I mean, that's as bad a turnover
Horrendous.
as you're going to see in the NBA. I mean, he just, unforced, gagged up the ball. So they still need to be a little bit more careful, I think. But there was still a little, Tatum had it going for a stretch in that game, and he really had it going. And then he kind of lost it, and I felt part of it was he was kind of like trying to get in his bag too much, And so that's still going to be an issue, I think, at times for this team is different guys feeling like it's their night and getting in their bag and not keeping the ball moving. And in some ways, I can't blame Tatum. There were a couple of times I was like, pass it, and then he just drained a ridiculous turnaround. You're like, okay, that's why he's not passing it. I get it. You're one of the best players in the league. But eventually, that stuff normally turns around and comes back to you unless you are the elite of the elite all time, a Jordan, a Bird, a Kobe. And Tatum's not at that level yet. And it did come back to him.
All right, so and we also looked at that action that they ran on the Porzingis 3 with 1:29 left.
Yeah.
Little high screen and Porzingis.
You pick that up from Scal Action. I like that. Is that an NBC Sports Boston word? Is that in the handbook they hand out?
It's just
Action?
it's a basketball word that is seeped in, even to
Okay.
my rock head. Okay. But you know what I'm saying. In the 7 years, we've never really seen, I'm sure it's happened, but we don't. Do you see Tatum and Brown play off each other like that?
Not as easily, no. I mean, they've run pick and roll in the past with Tatum and Brown, and they've been able to get shots doing that, but it is a little bit different, I think, with Porzingis. And the other part of that, I'm sure there are other actions off of that Mazzulla and his staff have, because when it's Porzingis' guy, now you're drawing a big out, right? And so somebody should be able to cut behind, get into the paint. There should be another action, another option off of that. That's one of the reasons they went out and got Porzingis. I mean, I think Brad's been pretty transparent about it.
So you think that's position specific? That's not a Brown-Tatum issue?
I think it's specific to, yes, position and also the way Porzingis plays the position. I mean, they've run that stuff without Horford, too. They like stretch bigs. That's what they like. Yeah. They like stretch bigs. And so when you have a stretch big who's going to pull the opposing defender out like that, it does make it a little bit easier to run that as opposed to two wing guys. Those wing defenders are used to being that far out there. The big guy's not. And he's a little uncertain about, do I go and close out? And most of the time they end up just kind of, half-assing it. And they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And this big can shoot over anybody.
Yeah. He was great.
When he gets his arms up there, I mean, really, how far off the ground is the ball? 9.5 feet? Like, who the hell's going to block that? No, I'm not kidding. He's
someone who's 7'5".
Right.
He needs a quick release, too.
Even he does have a quick release. I noticed that, too. Even if there's a center out there, he's just going to hoist it right over him. You can't. I mean, if he's playing well, and Doc Rivers said this a million times, he's a brutal mismatch. There's nothing you can do. There's really nothing you can do. Chris, people always look at it as they traded Marcus Smart for Porzingis. Don't you think it's really swapping Robert Williams for Porzingis? In other words,
that's a good point.
So now the defense is a little different. Robert Williams is more flashy.
But the offense is obviously way better.
But now you're getting a center who can play both ends of the floor, which not many teams have.
It's the two Williams for Porzingis, and it's Smart for Holly. I mean, if you want to look at it that way.
Yes.
I mean, and those are upgrades, I think. So Holiday is, for sure. We'll see on Porzingis if he can make it through.
Yeah, good question.
It does leave him a body short, though, Chris. I mean, didn't you watch that game and say, boy, they have no one coming off the bench?
Yeah, they need another big. And they do have probably the most fragile, fragile front court in the NBA with Horford and Porzingis. Porzingis played the 65 games last year, but that was the most he'd played since his second year in the league when he played 66. And can he last? And even then, I mean, again, I know it was opening night, but he was turning red, bending down, and huffing and puffing at points out there. And I was worried. I'm like, that's how you get hurt, when you're tired. I don't want to see a ton of minutes from Luke Cornett. Horford didn't play the second game of back-to-backs last year, and he still sort of broke down in the playoffs. Not physically, but in terms of his execution, he shot 29% from three. He wasn't the same guy having to guard some of the guys he had to guard like Embiid. So they need to find another big. But my inclination is, and I think Jimmy's probably hearing similar stuff. They know that, and they're going to go get another big before the year's over.